All right, welcome everybody to the Rogue World podcast. I have a very special guest, and in fact, the reason we're sitting in my kitchen right now, one is because the podcast studio is not finished yet. You guys have seen updates of that. And two, because this man across from me is the reason that we even have this house. Tony Acosta, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for joining me, bro. I'm excited. I've been watching you do all these other episodes. Been a little jealous, not gonna lie. So we're finally here. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited that we could, get together, make it work. We threw some audibles today, but I wanted to talk to you. Other than being a broker and also, working in real estate, helping, people like me, entrepreneurs, get into amazing homes. The biggest thing I actually wanted to focus on is your journey to help individuals in speaking and TEDx. So you have a TEDx event coming up here in October, right?
That's right. We had one in March, and next
And we had
October.
one just last March, which was really awesome. Tell me about the journey of the why TEDx, why going this route, and what are the goals for your journey within TEDx?
Yeah, sure. So TEDx is kind of the pinnacle of speaking for a lot of people, right? Everybody thinks of TED Talks and they think, oh, I'd love to get there. And so it's basically the big leagues of speaking, if you will. It's a worldwide brand and they have an amazing setup. And so as a speaker, I always wanted to be a part of that. And as is often the experience with a lot of people, they'll apply for TEDx events and they won't get accepted. So that happened to me, right? You apply, you don't get accepted, you apply, you don't get accepted. And so what I started trying to do is get involved in local TEDx chapters to kind of learn the ins and outs. I've always loved doing events myself, but I wanted to somehow be immersed in that world just to learn.
Okay.
And so I got involved with Salt Lake, St. George, and different volunteer positions. And then on one occasion, I have a conversation with one of the gals from Salt Lake, and she says, hey, there's not actually an established chapter in Utah County. There's been kind of one-off events, UVU, BYU, but there's no established chapter. She said it would be cool if there was one. And at the time, obviously, imposter syndrome, I'm thinking, well, I mean, I've never done one of these events. It's TEDx.
And you have to have a certain number.
You have to have a certain number. It's very structured. You have to apply. So it's not like you can just throw a TEDx event because you want to. You have to apply for the licenses and what's your background. But I just kind of have that personality. I just think, let's just try it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? They can say no.
Yeah.
I've already heard no before. But because I've been involved in some other things, Utah Podcast Coalition and stuff, they approved our license, which was scary as shit as soon as they told us yes, because the idea is cool, but then as soon as it gets real, you're like, oh, damn, like now I actually have to do it.
Now you're the guy.
Now I'm responsible for this event. And so it was a lot of fun. In March was our first event, but I really fell in love with the process of helping these speakers discover what their message is. And that's different from just speaking in general.
Yeah.
Right? Because people do speaking engagements all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
They tell their story or they talk about their business. But TED is more of finding a single idea. A single idea. What is it that you've got, that one idea out of so many throughout your life that can provide value to somebody else? And it's more about the message than the individual. And I fell in love with that concept.
Yeah, I find that, especially because you also spoke at the recent Rogue World Live event, and you were talking about kind of like the different kinds of speakers. And I feel like, on that journey of finding that one thing that you can talk about, you got to find, okay, where do you fit in this category? And then we got to dive into it. And I find that, man, TEDx, especially for me, when I think of TED Talks, it's extremely... it's a daunting task just for if you wanted to speak, because there's a lot of opportunity that comes with that. If TED really likes the talk, they could take it and they could post it front page on their website, and then all of a sudden the world has their eyes on that one little segment there. How do you go through I feel like every entrepreneur goes through a moment where they're like, I think I could be a speaker, And the honest truth, and that's something I've kind of learned from you, is the honest truth is not everyone's made to be a speaker.
No.
And some people are made to just facilitate in smaller groups, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So how do you help somebody one, realize what kind of speaker they are. And even if speaking is for them, how do you come to that truth of like, hey, speaking just really isn't for you?
Sure. I think there are a couple of key questions that any speaker or prospective speaker has to answer, and answer them in a way that's objective and truthful. Number one, why do you want to speak?
Okay.
Seriously, why? Is it an ego thing? Is it because you want to be seen? Is it because you think it's going to make you look cool? Why is it? And I think that for everyone, there's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But it's how much of that is
that
there.
like 90% of the reason is
or
because
is it like,
you think you're going to be able to reach more people and everyone's going to see you and everyone's going to want to do what you're doing.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to get you followers? Do you think it's going to... So are you in it for yourself? Or is it because you genuinely feel that your message can impact someone else? Now, a good litmus test for this is, let's say you, Dusky, your life story, or whatever concepts you extract from your life, you write the perfect TED Talk. It's got the points, it's just perfect. How do you feel giving that to somebody else to deliver instead of you? That's the question.
Man, like thinking about that, like I'd want it to be me to give it, because I feel that only I could bring in the right emphasis of what needs, like when I'm telling you a story, the only reason that you feel that it's important to me is because of the feeling that I'm giving you. So for me, I would say, I would want it to be me and not somebody else.
So you would feel uncomfortable handing it over for somebody else to give?
Yeah, somebody else could.
Sure.
But I just don't think it would be as effective. I would totally give it to somebody, but I would sit there in the audience and be like, I just don't think that, I think I could have just helped more and like connected more. That's what I would think.
Yeah, and that's typically the answer.
Yeah.
That's almost always the answer. So my job as a TEDx speaker coach is to get you to a place where you feel comfortable delivering it, because the emphasis, because you know it's going to make an impact. So for example, if it's your talk, and we can vice versa, but I happen to be a better presenter than you, a better storyteller than you, I can tell your story and have the impact, and you're okay with that.
Oh,
that's hard.
That is hard.
And if you think about it, most stories, we don't hear from the individual. When you hear of stories of Martin Luther King or all of these different people, stories, they didn't tell it to you.
No.
But if a good storyteller can tell you the story of Abraham Lincoln or whoever it is, and they can portray it, it's powerful.
Wow.
But it's hard to get there. It's hard to get there because I felt it. I feel you.
Yeah.
It's that ego, man.
Yeah.
This is my story. Like I can tell it better.
I created this.
I can do it. And you're right. Absolutely. But TED is about the message. So even though you would be the one delivering it, I need to get you to a place where if it wasn't you, you would be okay. Why? Because that changes the delivery.
So that's what you're looking for when a TEDx person's like, hey, I want to speak at TEDx. You're like, okay, can you take yourself out of your message?
Right.
Because if you can't do that, if the message is, for example, Brad Draper, because he's speaking at yours, right? At your next one. If Brad Draper is the story and the message, well, then it doesn't fit in TEDx.
It doesn't.
It's what Brad can give and deliver, that one thing that he's going to be teaching that will go forward.
Which is what makes TED unique. Because when someone goes to a TEDx event, there are people that you've never heard of before.
Yeah.
And the message is crush. You've never heard of these people. They're not
ever.
speakers. They're just people.
Yeah.
But people go to TEDx knowing that every message is going to be awesome. And they are. That's why careers are built on the back of TED, because the emphasis is on the message. It's not this idea where, and this happens a lot in business seminars, which there might be some value in, but it's just different. I go to real estate seminars and the message is, hey Dusky, I'm Tony. I'm an amazing real estate agent. This is everything that I've done. Do what I do, because if you do what I do, then you're going to be like me.
Yeah.
And so you go to these and you take notes and like, I want to be like him.
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not that that's a negative, because I've been to these events and you're like, oh, I want to be like the Sean Whalens or the whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, cool. But that's not TED.
Yeah.
TED is what is underneath that. What is the one
What's
idea?
like a one principle?
The one thing, and that's why it's called Ideas Worth Sharing. And it's hard to get speakers mentally there. It's a process. It's different. And I tell people, this is not your normal speaking gig.
Yeah.
This is different. And that process of discovery, of trying to pull out the things that are sensitive, the things that really have value, cutting things out that you might not share, that process of building that, I'm in love with that.
So let's say somebody's listening to this and they kind of go, they just went and did all of that with us. If they were by themselves before they came to you and they kind of wanted to present the best shot, right? They wanted to come to you and be like, hey, this is my best stuff. Obviously, I need help. They understand, like, that's what you guys are there for. You know, when somebody applies and everything, they get accepted. You're like, okay, now we have to go through a couple of things in order for you to get on that stage.
Yeah, and that's just the polishing phase. So what I recommend is study TED Talks.
Okay.
There's a certain structure. So usually there is a concept that is memorable. For example, in our last event, Heidi gave the pitch perfect TED Talk where she told the story of her father committing suicide when she was very young and how that affected her life. But she broke that down into a concept that she used the word stop. It was S-T-O-P. And each one meant something different. S-T-O-P. And so TED Talks often have those dynamics where they use acronyms, they really package the information in a way that is memorable, that people can then walk away with that idea as a concept that they can apply into their life. So when I see an application and I say, okay, I can tell this person is focused on the message. The application is not just about themselves. They're not just telling me how great they are. They're actually breaking down a concept that I can take and apply to my own life. And so in the application, I actually do this on purpose. They teach you how to do this. There's a bio section, and then there's a what's your idea section. Often, it's all a bio. Does that make sense?
Yeah. They're
It's
just
all
telling
a bio.
This is all about me.
So the bio, my name's Tony, I do this, and then in the bottom it's like, oh, and then I did this, and I do this, and I do that, and I do that. There's no real depth of message. So if you want to get accepted to TED, yes, your bio matters, but there's that second box. And that second box takes time and it takes thought. So I always tell people your TEDx application, you shouldn't be able to fill out a TEDx application in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it has to have some thought. In this last election, there were people that filmed themselves explaining their idea. They actually did the talk. It wasn't great, but you can kind of look at it and you're like, okay, there's something there.
Yeah.
So our job is to extract what is there to make it great, but you have to display it. It's way beyond how cool you are and how much money you've made and all this stuff. It's not about that at TED.
Yeah.
It's not about that. And that's hard for some people to grasp.
That's incredible. I think it's so, for me as somebody that's definitely newer to the speaking world, not newer in the sense of I'm very comfortable around speakers and that kind of stuff, and thrown my own event, which was so much more than I thought it was going to be. It's just like TED definitely, it's that pinnacle, you know, it's that top tier where it's like, hey, it's not about you. It's not about egos. It's about the one thing that somebody can take and change their life, or one concept. I mean, I've listened to TED Talks that are like about a certain tribe in, you know, South America that does this one thing that changes their everything, and it just blows your mind. And like I always walk away and I'm like, okay, well, how do I apply that? And then that's how they taught it. And so when you go through, you go through all these things and you're building TED, the TED process for you is way broader because you have to not only, you know, put on these events where you have 150 people.
It's capped at 150. Yep.
Capped at 150, which I will say, like, just genius in the way that you kind of box that up in March. Like, here's your table. Bring, like, these are the people, you're in charge of this many tickets, that kind of stuff. And then, but you have to do that not just once, you have to do that 3 times before you can apply to do a big one.
Right. And so the reason why it's like that is because, as you found out, putting on events is way harder than it seems.
Yeah.
There's so much backwork, logistics, food, volunteers, where the speaker's gonna come in, where their slides and the audio, like there's so much behind it. And people have a certain expectation for TED events. When you go to a TED event, you expect top-notch professionalism. Like it is gonna be an event.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And TED has to see that you do it successfully, that you know how to put on an event, that your audio visuals are good, that your ticketing system is good. Like all of that has to be in place before you do the massive events. And not only is it just doing multiple successful events, but then we have to go to what's called the qualifying conference, where in this year was in Canada, where you have to go to one of these massive events to learn, to see what it's like. What is it like to have a 2-day event with 40 speakers and 20 breakout sessions? Like just the logistical jump from one to the other is massive. And so I have really learned to kind of dial in some of those things. We learned so much from the first one. The second one's gonna be way smoother, but I need to level myself up as an organizer to going from 6 speakers to 9 speakers to 48.
Wow.
Over a weekend.
Holy cow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the logistics of the team and more people and what are the positions and where does everybody have to be?
So instead of 6, are you doing 9 this time?
We did 9 this time.
Wow.
And the goal is eventually when we do TEDx Provo, is to have a full weekend, two full days.
That's number 3?
So
or
the
is that
goal is
number
to in
4?
2024,
Okay.
probably fall 2024, if we can pull it off, it would
Yeah.
be TEDx Provo. That's the goal. Full weekend, just full lineup, 40 speakers, breakout sessions, a tech section, like just the whole 9 yards. But it's hard to get there. And it goes back to this thing of everybody has an idea. We think something would be cool, but then the implementation of doing it, now you're like, oh shit, like this kind of sucks a little bit.
Now, what would your advice be? Either just for anything, right? What would your advice be if somebody's like, this is a cool idea, but for them to understand what they're actually getting into and also not being scared of stepping forward?
Yeah, I think you have to gather as much info as you can.
Okay.
So what helped me was I had already kind of seen a little bit of what went on from a volunteer basis in some of the other chapters. So I talked to the organizers, I talked to the selection committee, I kind of asked questions, hey, how does this work? How do you guys do this? So you try to learn as much as you can, and then you see and you ask yourself genuinely, now that you have a little bit more context, do you want to do this? Do you think you can do this? And even if you don't know everything, there has to be this little inch of belief in yourself that whatever I don't know, I'm willing to figure out and be coachable and learn as I go through this process. But you have to kind of let go of your ego, which tends to be the theme across TED for speakers and organizers. That first event, there was a lot that I didn't know. You just had your first event. You're like, God damn it. I hope something doesn't happen. You're like, I hope everybody shows up. I hope everything goes well.
Man, I didn't even think that anybody would show up just to listen, but I'm like, putting people on stage no matter what, it's
terrifying. Like we started in the first 10 minutes, it wasn't full. I'm like, geez, are people not gonna show up?
And then all of a sudden people just show up.
And boom, it's full, right? But it's that anxiety and just really working on your leadership skills, because you're gonna be under a lot of stress. And I thought you did this very well, of not vomiting that stress on other people.
Yeah.
Of actually building a team, making sure everybody is organized, they know what they have to do. And whatever stress you have, you swallow it, bro. Like, that's on you. You're not gonna just be an ass to everyone.
You don't go and be like, I'm so stressed out. You're like
nobody cares.
They are just they're here for their 15 minutes.
Literally.
That's it.
That's it. And your job is to make that experience as enjoyable as possible. From the training, I mean, and here's the cool thing about speaking. When you speak, everybody in the audience is rooting for you.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to sit through a shitty speech.
Oh, I've never thought about it that way.
Nobody wants to sit through a shitty presentation. Nobody. Everybody wants you to win. Everybody wants you to crush it. Everybody wants you to change their lives in the next 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So this idea of being anxious of the crowd, are they going to judge? Everybody wants you to win, bro. Nobody wants to see you
be wowed.
Nobody wants to watch you tank.
Yeah.
Nobody. So once speakers understand that, they're like, okay, cool. Like it just gives you a little bit of confidence, because it's true. Nobody wants to sit through a crappy presentation for 15 minutes. You want to hear a rock star.
Because that 15 minutes will feel like an hour.
It's like, dude, really, bro? So for me, it's a huge responsibility to try to provide that.
Yeah.
And try to make an enjoyable evening for people where they can actually get value and walk away thinking, man, that was cool.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the things that you do, be that within TEDx, be that within, teaching people how to podcast, within, real estate and everything. I feel from my outward perspective of seeing you, you've kind of sunken in to this position of, I can put people together and I can teach them the correct lessons on how to get there.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you do that super well. One of the things that I really appreciate about you when I watch anything that you do, you're always like, you know what? No matter what you need, I got you, but like, you got to do this, so come here. Mm-hmm. Like, we have to talk about the hard things, the easy things. We got to get there, because if you want to be at X, I got to build you up.
Sure.
And make you there. And when it comes to, just like you're, going to your real estate class that you do, it was like on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Or so. And you're up there and like you have these people that have probably been in the business for
years,
some time. And they come and they're there to learn from you every time, because they know that you're going to be teaching them correct principles. And I feel like that's kind of like the role that you've been kind of developing into. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, and that comes from my upbringing.
Okay.
So ever since I was a kid, so I'm the oldest of four, and I grew up in a household that was super combative. My parents cannot communicate with each other. It was constant fighting all the time, nonstop. But me being the oldest of four, ever since I was 6, 7, 8 years old, since my parents couldn't communicate with each other, I was the messenger. So I was the one that my mom would say, hey, tell your dad this and this when they were upset. So I would go tell dad, and then dad would give me the response, and I would kind of bring it back and forth. So I learned early on the importance of communication and the consequences if you get it wrong. And so with all of these things that I try to do, be it podcasting, TEDx, real estate, I have learned that if you can communicate effectively, you eliminate so much of your problems. I often say we're all 3 to 7 tough, difficult conversations away from a different level of happiness.
Yeah.
But you got to know how to have those conversations. And me growing up seeing the opposite and the effects of not being able to do that, I'm obsessed with helping people communicate what they want to communicate in a way that actually comes across. Because there's so much frustration, whether professionally or personally, with not being understood, with not feeling heard.
Break that down a little bit.
For example, how often does it happen to you that you say something and then the person that's across from you has a completely different interpretation? And you're like, how?
Probably like 70-30, like 30% of the time somebody will be like,
It happens.
oh yeah, this. And you're like, what the heck?
You're like, there's no way I could have said that. There's no way.
Yeah.
That's not it.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot in relationships. It happens a lot in trying to go through our own traumas and our own things because we don't know how to communicate it. And whenever we do, we feel like we're misunderstood. We feel like we're not heard. We feel like nobody cares. And so in my own way, I've tried to help people improve that skill of communication because I feel that it's a massive problem. And I've seen the effects of that when you can't do it. But I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit there and give you a therapy session. The only thing I can do within my area of expertise is try to teach you how to develop an idea, communicate it in a way that's effective, and hopefully the person on the other side can catch it the way that they're supposed to.
So how do you take somebody through, that process? Is it very similar to what you're doing with TEDx? Are you basically running them through and saying, hey, what kind of person are you when you're communicating? And it's like, okay, you're here talking with a big group. Okay, let's take those same principles and it's how are you communicating effectively with one person? How do you know you're effectively communicating?
Yeah, that's a great question. So people often ask, how do I know if I'm doing this right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now for speakers, it's if there are people in the audience that get value from what you say.
Okay.
which people will come up and they'll say, hey, I
was
loved your
awesome.
talk.
That was
But not everybody's going to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I just had a conversation today about someone who wants to speak. And what I recommend to speakers is craft your message for one person. Who's the one individual that you want to talk to? I'll give you an example. Anne is someone who wants to do a TED Talk. She hasn't applied yet, but she wants to do it. And as she's telling me her story, she gave me permission to share this, and I've shared it multiple times. So she was, for a long period of her life, she couldn't have kids. She tried. She really wanted to. She tried. She did the clinics and the IVFs, and she went with the doctors. Didn't work. Finally, she did. It worked. She got pregnant, had a beautiful baby girl. When the baby was 2 months old, the baby passes away. And that was something that completely changed her life. I mean, I can't imagine that kind of pain.
Me neither.
So as I'm walking her through this, she says, I feel like I would like to talk about this, but it still kind of hurts a little bit, so I'm not sure. And so as we're having this conversation, I try to ask her what it felt like on that day.
Wow, that's hard.
Yeah, it was hard.
Oof.
And I asked her, I'm like, are you willing to go here with me?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, okay. Try to remember what it felt like on that day, the day after, and the day after. And she starts to tell me, well, I felt like this. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to go out. Then I started asking, okay, what were some things that kind of helped you a little bit? Maybe helped you get your mind off of things. She said, well, I used to go on walks. I started listening to classical music. I try to read to get my mind off of things. I said, okay, here's the thing. If you really want to do this, there are millions of people who have lost a kid this week.
Yeah.
Happens every day. We're next to hospitals.
Yeah.
Every day. Someone lost a child today. They feel today the way you felt 17 years ago. And maybe, just maybe, those things that you did to help ease the pain, even though it didn't eliminate it, can save them some grief. Maybe.
Wow.
So what weight of responsibility can you feel knowing that you already survived that with all the hardships? Maybe you can make it 1% lighter for someone else through your message. When that hits you, it changes everything.
Yeah.
Now it is about the message. Now it's not about you anymore. It's about, this is what happened to me. This is how I dealt with it. Maybe it can serve you. And if it does, I love it.
And I feel like with ego, a lot of the reason is like because people have such a big ego, they're not ready for a TED Talk because they're not ready. They don't feel like they're ready to get on stage and change everybody's lives.
Yeah. Or there's just these vague statements of, I just want to help people.
Yeah.
Help people do what? Oh,
Yeah.
be successful. At
How?
what?
Yeah.
How? For how long? In what area of life?
What does success look like to you?
Yes, you want to help me do what? You want to help me make more money? You want to help me have a better relationship? You want to what? And a lot of people can't answer that question. And they just say, I just love helping people. I want to help people. I want to change people's lives. Well, what does that mean? That's what this process of discovery is all about. What does that mean and for who? For Anne's case, it was trying to alleviate the pain of a parent who recently lost a child. That's her avatar. That's who she can speak to based on her experience, on her life, on her story. I can't relate to that very much because I haven't lost a child. I haven't been through what you've been through.
Yeah.
But the magic is in that person, not trying to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
And often we feel that if we can have this general message, we'll get more followers, it'll be more relatable to people, and we end up being vanilla ice cream. Some people like mint Rocky Road chocolate chip.
That's true.
So I have to figure out, what flavor are you, bro?
Yeah.
And I talked about this at Rogue World. Are you an achiever? Are you a warrior? Are you an academic? Where do you fit? So that we can find the one person that you can actually impact and go after them, not everybody.
That's a, I always bring this entire podcast is actually just for me. So that's why I have you on here. Yeah. It's for me. It's great that we have this recorded and that we can have this conversation for many people. But that's something that I feel I have struggled with is am I achiever? Am I, at Rogue World, I shared my story, right? I went through the grief and the pain and everything, and then came out the other side of it and said, hey, look, this is where I'm at now. So you can do that too. And then tried to teach and I say try just because I feel like that's our best thing that we can do, is try to teach, okay, here are some lessons that I've learned to being successful. And so I feel, we'll just ask this. Do you remember the talk that I gave at Rogue World?
Yes.
What do you think were good? What do you think was good? And what do you think was terrible?
So I'll ask you this question, and because I know your background a little bit,
Okay.
what result would fulfill you more? If you could help me make more money, if you could help me overcome a divorce, or if you could help me overcome a tragic health scare, near-death experience, and flourish on the other side. If you had to pick, what would you say?
I'm like stuck between make more money, and when you say the last one, it's almost like help you get past something traumatic.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, like
call it what you
not
want.
necessarily like, you know, yes, there's been a ton of burn victims, all that stuff like that, and I would love to help them. But it's more so like I feel everybody has trauma in their life, be that you went through trauma today because something happened, you got in an argument.
Yeah.
Right? That's small, and you know that you can overcome it. But I want to teach people that there's a better side.
Sure.
To that.
But a powerful speaker finds their avatar, right? So that's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
So your story of having your accident, your fire accident,
Yeah.
there are people that are going to be able to relate to that.
Yeah.
And so as you dig through that, it's okay, trauma, I agree. That's a very broad term. So trauma could come from sexual abuse. Maybe you didn't experience that.
No.
Can't speak to it. It can come from being beaten as a child. It can come from being homeless. It can come from so many different things, small and large, that can kind of encapsulate trauma. But you can't speak to all of those. I can't speak to all of those.
Yeah.
So in the same way, if it's being too broad, versus if we say, these are the things that I have lived through, this is what I have learned, there are people that are in that situation today. There are people in ICUs from burn accidents today. So who would you rather speak to? And that's where you start. It doesn't mean that you're going to pigeonhole yourself forever, but that's where you start, because that's what makes you relatable.
That's what's hard, because people think that if that's what I start with, then that's my message for the rest of my life.
No, not at all. People change.
Yeah.
People change, and you're able to, because there are also different kinds of events.
Yeah.
Some events are money events.
Yeah.
They're business events where you're going to learn how to make money. And
So
there are other kinds of events.
It's really just it's one, learning about what kind of audience you're going to be speaking to, and then who in that audience you can speak to.
Because it's answering the question, why should I listen to you? That's the question speakers need to ask. Objectively, why would I listen to you, bro? Because you've made a lot of money? Okay, in what? Well, investments? I'm not into investments.
Yeah.
Why would I listen to you? You're going to talk to me about trauma?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
And not answering that question is the reason why we have single people giving marriage advice. That's why we have these 19-year-old life coaches, bro. Because they haven't asked themselves, why would I listen to you about a divorce or about my child being, what?
Yeah.
And it applies in business too.
That's a hard thing to act like. Absolutely. In
And
business,
it's
I think
black
in
and
business,
white.
it's a lot easier for people.
It's crystal
in
clear.
Business.
Yep.
To be like, well, why would I listen to you about investing when you haven't invested?
It's black and white. Why would I listen to you about trauma if we have
Yeah.
different kinds of trauma?
Yeah.
Who would you listen to about building an apparel company? Me or Sean Whalen?
True. Sean Whalen.
But what if I'm like, oh, bro, like I think that's a hot topic. I think people are into apparel companies. So I'm going to craft this message about building an apparel company, and I'm going to sell it. I'm going to package it super nice to sell it or to be a speaker about that. You haven't done it. So that's why TED is about you. What is your idea? And sometimes it can be about trauma, but sometimes it can be something as basic as I'm a software engineer and I have this app and it changed my life. But it's you. What can you talk about?
Interesting.
And I've fallen in love with that process
Yeah.
because it's not talking to everybody about everything. It's a select few that will relate to what you've gone through, that will understand you.
Yeah.
I don't know what it feels like to have burns all over my body, but other people do.
Yeah. I mean, if you could just speak to 1% of the world,
That's millions of people.
Tens of millions.
Millions of people that have gone through something similar.
Yeah.
And so for all of the prospective speakers, I think really go inward, be introspective about that, and find
And then
that
how
thing.
do you structure that? That's the thing. Like how do you, and we might be going in circles a little bit. We're going to go in freaking circles if that's how people think that we are going. Let's say you have this trauma, you have this thing, and you're going inward and you write it down and you say, these are the people I want to talk to. Like, do you just then be like, okay, well, what would I want to give them? If they were sitting across from me, what would I tell them?
That's where you start. That's where you start. So pick one. You've got either whether it's divorce or the fire or the investment. Pick one.
We'll switch it up. We'll talk divorce.
Okay, divorce.
Okay.
What would you say to somebody that got divorced yesterday? That went through the exact same thing you did. You can give as much or as little detail as you want. It was a nice divorce, it was an ugly divorce, whatever it was. That happened to someone yesterday. What would you tell them today? Top of your head.
Put your head down and keep going forward.
Okay. Expand on that.
I would tell that person, because when you get divorced, no matter good or ugly, I would say mine was just somewhere in between.
Are there kids involved?
No kids.
Okay, no kids.
No kids involved. Newly divorced, young.
Okay.
That's because I was 24.
Pushback from family members?
I would say inform, but you're on your own path. For me, I lone wolfed.
Okay.
Like, I was like, you know what? This is where I'm at. A lot of people on the outside saw a different version of my marriage that they didn't see the truth, right?
How did you deal with that?
It took time in explaining what was going on from a standpoint of not blaming the other person.
Explaining it to who?
Family.
Okay. Did you feel like maybe they had
it took
the
me
wrong
months.
idea?
Took me, yeah, absolutely. My family, they didn't have the wrong idea of, like, they just were like, well, why couldn't you make it work? Right? It's not like there was an idealistic of this is what's going wrong. My family never questioned that. It was well, why couldn't you make it work?
So what drove you to feel the need to explain yourself versus isolating yourself and saying, you know what, this is my life. Screw you guys. Don't ask me questions.
Well,
this is my choice.
That for for a year, I barely had a relationship with my dad, with any of my family. For like a whole year, they had like a group text, and I would barely even talk to them, because I'm like, you know what, I am going to focus on what is it. If I went so far as to get married, and then buy a house with this person, move 2 hours away with this person, and I still wasn't happy, then I don't know what actually makes me happy.
Do you feel like isolating yourself for a year was a good idea or a bad idea?
Great idea.
You thought it was
I thought it was the right thing to do, because I needed to figure out what was going to make me happy without other influences of opinions that had really big influence on my life.
Okay, there you go. Now you've got something.
Okay.
Now the person that got divorced yesterday, now you can give them that piece of advice. Consider isolating yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Consider maybe not feeling that you need to explain to everybody. Maybe you just need to take some time for yourself and figure out what you truly want, instead of going on this crusade, checking off boxes and making sure everybody around you understands what happened. It's not the time for that right now.
Yeah.
Now you have the bones of a message.
Oh.
Now you've got some bones, and you might feel comfortable with that. You might not. You got to tweak it, add, subtract. But that's a little bit of the process of who's your avatar. Someone recently divorced, young, families maybe judging you a little bit. They're not really on board, questioning things. You don't know, should I explain? Should I not? There's someone feels like that right now.
It also sounds like, And this is I think this is just kind of a little bit of a controversial statement, that if you're gonna go to a certain, like you get invited to a speaking event and there's just nothing that would coincide with the audience that's gonna be there and what you can share, that you say no.
Don't go. Absolutely don't go.
I've never heard of somebody saying no to a speaking
Absolutely,
gig.
because why?
Because people...
Because we want the picture, bro.
Yeah.
We want the picture on stage with the mic.
Yeah.
Because we're coming from ego. And so you're going to get up there, I'm going to go to this crypto conference. And what the hell am I going to say?
Never been in crypto.
Never. I've never bought crypto in my life. I've bought like $2 of Bitcoin. And I lost the wallet. Like, I have nothing to say.
Oh, man.
But that's the question. What can you say? And it's often this cliche thing of everybody's unique. Not until you peel the layers back and discover how you're unique is it that it actually takes form and it takes meaning. Because there are certain things that you have gone through, that I've gone through, that we can speak to as experts, true experts.
Yeah.
That other people cannot. And some people are going to vibe with you. Some people are going to think they're going to disagree. Some people might disagree with your divorce strategy.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way I would ever do that. I need my family, whatever, counter arguments. But somebody's going to hear that and be like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And it might work for them.
Yeah.
And in so doing, you've saved someone some grief, some heartache, shortened that curve. And that's what it's all about. That's what speaking is all about. How can I take what is in here, give it to you in a way that is valuable?
Man, got me thinking.
Yeah.
Because now got more rogue worlds, got more speaking stuff, and now I got to change everything.
Well, it's just making it, because the more true it is to yourself, the more impact it's going to have. A lot of speakers talk about things they shouldn't speak on just because they think it's cool, just because they think it's a hot topic.
Wow.
It's not about that. It's about you. And as you progress, as you learn new things in life, now you're going to have new things to talk about. You do other businesses, and now you constantly adapt and you grow, but it's looking inward versus outward. And very simple, it's what have I gone through that I can talk about versus what do I think is cool? What do I think is going to go viral that can get me a lot of views?
Ooh. I was just having that conversation with my wife yesterday.
And it's hard.
Literally talking to her about the differences between like why I post whenever I want instead of posting at certain times, and why I do X, Y, and Z. And because it's like, well, it's not about going viral. It's about me living me and reaching out to people that want to listen to me. And sometimes it's not going to be, I post at 6 a.m. every day forever, because one thing about me is I do it when I'm ready and when I want to.
And also being comfortable with the idea that some people aren't going to like it.
Yeah.
And you and me are in a similar boat. I can relate to this. There are people that don't like you, bro.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right?
Yes.
There are people that are not fans of Dusky Rogue.
Yep.
There are people that are not fans of me.
Yep.
Got to be comfortable with that.
Oh yeah.
That
was the hardest thing. That was the hardest thing for me to get over.
And in the same way, you jump on stage, people aren't going to like your style. They're not going to relate to you. They're not going to think you're funny. They're not going to think you're engaging.
Yep.
They're going to walk away and they're going to be like, I mean, it was good. I mean, that Dusky guy, I mean, he was okay. I like this one better.
Yeah.
And someone's going to be like, dude, that Dusky, man, that blew my mind. You got to be comfortable with that though, instead of trying to please everybody. Because you and I both know there are people that are not fans of what's going on right now. That's life.
I love that. Man, what is the future of Tony Acosta? What do we have to look forward to other than this TEDx and building up? What is it that you're what is it that you're building that people should be aware of and look out for?
Yeah, so right now I'm still practicing, which sounds kind of weird.
Oh.
But I'm still practicing. I'm still practicing my own leadership skills, how to put on events, how to organize people, how to train speakers. And right now I'm doing it all in English because predominantly the platforms are built in English, knowing that it doesn't exist in Spanish. It doesn't exist. Public speaking in Spanish is brand new. Brand new. So my goal is to learn this very well over the next 10 years so that then I can build something real for the Spanish-speaking community and build the biggest speaker platform in the world for Hispanics. That's the ultimate goal. But I got to practice for another 8 years to get it down and then be like, okay,
So you think about like actually like starting to put on conferences and everything in Spanish.
All of it. Because it doesn't exist.
I love that.
There's like a couple of TEDx's here in Latin America, but it just doesn't exist. It's completely different. Here we've got resources and you can name off a bunch of speakers. Ask a Spanish speaker to name 10 speakers. They can't do it. The Gary V's and the Tony Robbins and the Ed Milet's, they don't exist, bro. Someone's got to do it. I'm going to try.
I love it. I think you'll do it. Man, Tony, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Like, this has been awesome. The thing about the conversations that we always have, they always, after this, I'm calling my employees, I'm going deep into everything I possibly can, because the conversations that we have, when I ask you any questions and could you come in with just like, if it's a hard answer, it's a hard answer, here you go. And so I think everyone like listening, everyone watching this, any of that, if you have any wanting to be a speaker or to communicate more effectively, I feel like we've covered a lot when it comes to not just you want to be a public speaker and go out and go do TEDx, that stuff. It's just like, if you want to be more effective when you knock on a door as a salesman, what is it about you that sells solar?
Yep. And understanding that.
And understands that.
From body language, tone, pitch, volume, all of it. It's an art form.
Man, Tony, if people wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Just Instagram, tonyacosta.us if you're an English speaker, tonyacosta.mx if you're a Spanish speaker. And yeah, we're here. Come to TED in October. Come to TED in October.
Yes.
And we'll have some fun.
This will be posted before that event. So if you're listening to this,
there might be tickets left.
Maybe get a ticket. And you should definitely be there. Man, Thank you so much.